moderator for this session today. Okay, thank you, Tech Chair. So as mentioned by our SAA, your mic will be muted, but if you have any question, please send it to me directly via the chat box. We will make sure to answer it during the sessions. Today's speaker is Lance Miller. Lance Miller is DTM is an award-winning speaker and trainer. He is Toastmaster 2005 World Champion of Public Speaking, and he has delivered over 5,000 speeches in over 60 countries on public speaking, leadership, and overcoming failure and adversity. Lance has been active in Toastmaster for 30 years. He's a double DTM and has held nearly all the club officer position multiple times. In 1999, he was part of the leadership team that built his home club, Renaissance Speakers, to 95 members and was the #4 club in Toastmaster International. He has an extensive business background as well as an adventure background, from climbing mountains to sailing across ocean to flying across continents. He is the CEO of TerraX LLC, providing sustainable products and technology to the agriculture, commercial, industrial, and marine markets. Fellow Toastmaster, please welcome Lance Miller by your voice. Over to you, Mr. Lance Miller.
Thank you, Tram, and thank you everybody who joined here today. And yes, been in this Toastmasters game for a while. Those of you that may not know the story behind my run-up to the World Championship, there are a lot of people that have come into Toastmasters in the first or second year, made it on the big stage. A couple that made it on the big stage and won it. There's a number of people that I know. I've interviewed most of the world champions in the world, and I was really surprised how many of them just sort of had this dynamic personality, and they came in and within the first 2 or 3 years, they were at the top of the game. That wasn't my case. I competed for 13 years in the competition. I didn't get out of my club for 9 years. And so I lost the club contest for 8 years. Now, there were some reasons for that. It wasn't I was necessarily just a horrible speaker. There were two reasons primarily. One was I had a good club. As you heard, we were building my club up to be wound up being the #4 club in Toastmasters. And my club contest many times was harder than the district contest, because I'd have 12 to 16 people in the club contest. But more than that, there was a problem I had actually connecting the speech subject to me and feeling that I had something of value to give the audience, of importance. So I would write speeches that were disrelated to me that I thought was an important subject that we needed to talk about. And I would try to impress the audience on the importance of the subject, because I was struggling with my own worth and relativity to the audience. And really, this journey I had to the World Championship was more a journey of self-discovery, self-realization, and really realizing where my value and worth was to the world, because it gave me that venue to go back and stand in front of a group of people and start to figure out what was it that I really believed, what was it that I really wanted to say that I felt would make a difference to the audience. Not necessarily just win the competition, because what I knew was when I was saying things that I didn't believe, I didn't win the competition. So it was sort of a double-edged sword. I needed to find myself so I could win the contest. And inside, I thought I was capable of doing it. But more than that, it was inside I wanted to do that. I wanted to make an impact on people. I wanted to have a positive effect on people. I wanted to hopefully lead people in a correct manner and be able to relate to them and have that influence. And Toastmasters gave me an environment to work that out. So this session is called Finding Your Voice. And I'm going to take you through some of the steps I went through. And this was not a well-charted path I was walking. It was a path I was discovering as I walked it. And there are 10 questions over the 13 years that I wound up asking myself that opened up certain components into discovering what my messages were, what my voice was. I didn't know those 10 questions when I started. And when I won the World Championship, one of the things about competing is I wouldn't share any of my secrets with anybody, because I was afraid they'd use them against me. Okay, so as I'm learning things coming up the line, you have the people in the district. I'm competing a lot of times against similar people all the time. And I'm not going out and giving seminars in my district to what I just discovered about how to have a more powerful message, because one of my competitors is going to get it and use it against me. And so when I won the world championship, it was really a phenomenal, especially the last 2 months preparing for my final speech. It was probably the most growth I had as a speaker and some of the most growth I had as an individual, because I really had to come to terms with who I was and what I wanted to say and what my relevance was at that point. And I sat down, and after I won, I sat down and started writing down what I remembered about my path. And my journey since then has really been sharing what I learned in the process and what I've discovered on it. So I have some PowerPoint slides I want to go over with you, because it allows me to track my presentation a little easier. Not that I would ramble all over the place, but I have specific points I want to make. What I'd like to do, I've never done this virtually, but I'm going to go over some points, and then I'd like to see if we could go on a creative exercise of coming up with some speech topics with some of the exercises I do, so you can see how it works, and then I'll give the speech. You guys are going to come up with how it comes together, and I'll give the speech. And that's what I'll have to do. When I do it live, it's a lot of fun to do it that way. And we should, with 90 minutes, we should have plenty of time for Q&A. So as we go through, if you have some questions, just hold on to them. And we'll try to get at least the last half hour of some Q&A with what we're talking about. So let me go through some of the things that I discovered as a baseline in speaking on this. So finding your voice. One of the things is the 3 things I always want to know when I go speak someplace. So that this has really kept me very, very stable when I'm invited out to speak. One is I want to know what my message is that I'm going to give. And that really is such an overriding important point in finding your voice. But it's any talk, you need to have a clear concept of your message. Otherwise, you have a tendency to wander all over the place, not sure what you're really going to do. The other one is, who's your audience? Now, Toastmaster audiences are wonderful audiences. They're the most loving, forgiving, engaged audiences you could ever speak in front of. I've done professionally speaking. I've taught management for all over the country for national consulting companies. I've sold or given financial seminars for agents who are helping people invest their money. And I would have an hour-and-a-half seminar I would give on the triangle or the pyramid of investing and inflation and interest rates and things like that. And a lot of those people came for a free chicken dinner. So they weren't necessarily a warm, inviting, loving, caring Toastmasters audience, but you need to understand who your audience is, what's relative to them, and how that message works. And the third thing I always want to know is, what's the venue or the room I'm speaking in? So is it at a, is it a lapel mic on a stage? Am I behind a lectern at a head table? Is it a seminar style room where I'm standing on the floor in front of the people? Where are the windows? I need to have an idea what the venue is, and then I'm more prepared. I don't get caught expecting I'm going to be speaking on a stage with a lapel mic, and all of a sudden I'm behind a lectern at a head table, and I had this speech planned out where I was going to be walking all over the place. So those are just 3 simple things I want to share with you that have helped me quite a bit. The next one is, this is the hardest thing I had to figure out. The hardest thing I had to do in speaking, bar none, was to be myself and just talk to the audience. And we see this all the time where somebody gets up to speak and they turn into a different individual. And you know exactly what I'm talking about to you right now. They turn into this person. And a lot of times I go, like in the speech competitions, the interviews are better than the speech, because the person's relaxed in the interview and they're like, oh, I learned so much. I was so nervous when I got up here, but my club support the interview, because the guy was just, or the individual was just being themselves and talking to the audience. And this is a big thing to get through to. And I coach a lot of people, and I'm telling them, the thing I'm trying to get you through right now, I have a whole series of drills I put people through and things like that, is to just relax, be yourself, and talk to the audience, because there's all this other stuff that comes on us when we stand up in front of a group. So in finding my voice, it allowed me to calm down into being myself more and more, and just talking to the audience rather than feeling that I needed to communicate in a more dynamic, you see when I do that, you start to disassociate with the audience at that point. We see people do this all the time. anyway, let's see. I found I had to connect with myself before I could connect with the audience. And it's like, what did I want to say? Did I believe the message? You know, well, did I feel this was important for the audience, you know, to hear? And I'm going to go through some steps here to, again, if you're in my last seminar, these are things I had to figure out for myself, and you're going to have to figure them out for yourself. I'm going to try to give you some tools today to help figure those things out. It's really the simplicity of what we're talking about. Let's see. Interest, the whole area of interest. I'll go, are you interested in the audience? Or are you trying to be interesting to the audience? Okay. Now, someone who's interested in the audience, their attention and their focus is on the audience. When you have someone who's trying to be interesting, they're like up here going, and ladies and gentlemen, and the next thing I'm going to show you is, you know, it's like, I'm going to entertain you. I'm trying to hold your attention up here. Their attention is not on the audience. Their attention is on themselves. And they're trying to get the audience's attention up on themselves, but they're not doing it. Here's the secret to doing this. The best way to be interesting is to be interested in the audience. And I would ask all of us to look back. There's some younger people on the call here, but there was a point in our lives where we were dating somebody. And if you ever went on a date with someone and they were interesting, it was all about, oh, wow, that's really, and it's like, what am I, chopped liver here? They weren't talking to me. They weren't interested in me. But the most interesting people I ever met were people who were interested in me. You know, and so it's an interesting game we can get into in life of trying to get people's attention by being interesting. And the way we get people's attention is by being interested in those people. And so that's why when I talk about wanting to know who my audience is, I want to be interested in the audience and what they're dealing with and what are they struggling with. And if I'm interested in that, they're going to find me interesting as a speaker. So that was a long learned lesson. It took me a lot of years to figure that one out, but you get it in 2 slides. Okay. So that's how quick it came to me. So attention. So let's just say for a second, we have units of attention. Okay. And we have 100 of them. And we can put, 10 units on our watch and what time it is. We can put 10 units on the door. We can have 80 units to put on the speaker or something. So where's our attention go? So the perfect speech for me is the speaker's attention is on the audience. Now this has to do again with really understanding, your message, you believe in your message, you're focused on it, because where else could our attention be as a speaker other than on the audience? And when we're live and I can do these, I can have, two-way communication with you. This is what people tell me, and this is what I've seen. You could be going, what's my next word? You can be thinking, oh, I hope I don't forget my speech. Where's your attention? Your attention is it's in your head. It's on remembering your speech. It's not on the audience. Oh, they don't like my message. I wish I hadn't have taken this. Where's the green card? Where's the green card? You're up there talking and you're going, your attention's on where's the green card? I want this to be over. All these things can be going on in our heads, but the best speeches are when we're out of our head and we're on the audience. We know what we're going to say. And we're really looking at the audience, talking to them and tracking with them. And that took me a while. And the speech competitions were things that allowed me to get to that level, because for many years in Toastmasters, I had a lot of stuff going on in my head. The other thing is the audience's attention is on the speaker. Now, my question I always like to ask, have you ever been timer and forgot to time? Well, what happened was the speaker got all your attention and you didn't put any attention on the timer. And this used to happen to me in my club all the time. I'd be up there speaking, I'd be giving this talk and I'm watching the timer and the timer's like, and I go, oh crap, I got all their attention. And I just have to wrap my speech up because I go, I don't know if I'm over. I know I'm not under. I hope I didn't go over, or all of a sudden they wake up and they go, green, yellow, red. In like 10 seconds, you get all three cards that come up. But that's happened a number of times. So it just gives an example that really good. To me, the perfect speech is the speaker's attention is on the audience's attention is on the speaker. That's the perfect equation I'm looking for. So then if that's like the ideal, as we come down from that, what happens? So I'm looking at where's my attention? Am I doing something that's distracting the audience? Like I used to have this weird thing I did with my arm like this all the time. When I first got in Toastmasters, I rocked my arm all the time and I didn't know I did it. And I kept getting coached on it, coached on it, and coached on it. So I had no idea, but it was distracting my audience all the time, just like it would right now if I'm talking to you and I'm sitting here rocking my arm. You know, there's things that we do that distract the audience's attention. So that's one of the things I'm looking at in my speeches and my coaching. Is there something that the speaker does that distracts the audience away from their message? You know, and I won't get into this real heavy, but a lot of props do that quite often. They distract the audience. They don't actually complement the speech. And so especially if you have a big prop on stage, I mean, I've seen some crazy things like, 16-foot ladders and horse mannequins and orange cones, and the speaker's up there walking around with a horse behind him. Where's part of my attention? It's on the horse. So rule I have for props is the prop should appear when you need it. Should appear when you need it and disappear when you don't, because I want the audience's attention on me. Okay, attitude, authority versus free will. So there's a thing, I'm going to pop out so I can just look at you. There's a thing that happens to us in life that I think it happens to everybody. When we're kids, we have a tremendous amount of free will. We have a tremendous amount of creativity. We can have a shoebox and a stick and be happy playing all day with the shoebox and the stick, and we have this tremendous ability to look at life and everything's new and exciting. And there's these big people in our lives called, at least I had them. I don't know if you had them, but they're called parents. And they're the authorities in our life. And the authorities basically teach us many times to sit there and be quiet. And I know in my family, it was painful to disagree with the authorities. So it wasn't a pleasant experience. So as a young, small-bodied person who is trying to exert my free will into life, I learned that life was a lot more enjoyable if I was aligned with the authorities. And just to give an example, I think this happens to all of us. I don't remember the exact time it happened, but it did happen because later in life, I would do this. I got ready to say or do something. And before I did it, I looked at my mom and dad and said, what would they say or do if I did that? And what they would say or do determined my actions. And I say at that point, who became the author of my actions? Now, the root word to authority is author, which means the one who writes it. At that point, the authorities or my parents became the authors of my thoughts and actions. And then I went to school and I was taught that if I sat in the seat at the right time, showed up at the right time, sat in the seat, if I studied what other people figured out, and if I didn't speak out when I wasn't called on, I got to go to the next class, I got to go to the next grade, and I got to succeed. So I got socialized, and I had a hard time with that. I spent 7th grade in the hall doing table topics with the principal and stuff like that. But anyway, then I get a job. And what I learned was if I showed up and did what the big people said, I got to succeed. And then I get a job, and you get a desk, and they say, here's your desk, come to work, be here on time, don't rock the boat. And if we like you, someday we'll promote you. And at that point, we've turned over our success, our purposes, our drive in life, waiting for an authority to okay us, to say it's okay for us to now succeed. Now, that's a very microcosm of what we go through. I went through that less than a lot of people did because I was sailing sailboats and flying airplanes and climbing mountains and jumping off cliffs and doing things. But when I got back in the work environment, I had this whole conflict going on of people telling me this is what I needed to do, and I was trying to make the other people happy. And what I see happens in Toastmasters, we come in with this whole component that we learned. And see, in Toastmasters, there is no higher authority to running your club. There is no higher authority to you writing a speech. But I watch people give speeches that they think the audience will approve of, or that somebody will see as a right speech, and it's not their speech. Because we've been conditioned or hypnotized, desensitized, mesmerized, whatever you want to call it, into doing things that make someone in authority happy. Because since we were 4 years old, it was painful to to disagree with the authorities, and so part of this, and so creating our own life, getting out every day and creating our own life is something that we struggle with. And how bad is it? Well, we ask people to come in and introduce themselves in an icebreaker for 4 to 6 minutes, and they pass out. And what we're saying is create your life for 4 to 6 minutes. It's yours. Create what you want. And we go, oh no. And so for me, a big part of what I learned in Toastmasters was how to create my life again and figuring out what my life was that I wanted to create. And that was at the root of me finding my stories. Okay, so let me jump back over onto, and so with that, when I talk to the audience, I try to address the free will of the audience rather than talk to them as an authority where I'm talking down to the audience and I'm ordering them along it from that standpoint. 3 parts of a speech. This is Lance Miller's. This is what I figured out for me. First part of the speech is we work a lot on mechanics in Toastmasters, the opening, body, conclusion, the call to action, the transition, the vocal variety on this, how we put the words together, the body movements, the stage movements. These are all the mechanics of the speech. So I just went through all those, okay? Visual aids, props. But what determines the mechanic is, there we go, is the message. The message determines what mechanics you put into place, because the message is the destination you want to arrive at with your speech. And it's a little bit like trying to plan a vacation and not knowing where you want to go on vacation. And I have people go, could you help me with my speech? And I go, yeah, what's your message? And if it takes them 5 to 7 minutes to tell me what their 5 to 7 minute speech message is about, I know they don't know their message very well. And I said, it's hard to write a speech if you don't know the message, because that's what the mechanics are going to deliver. But the question I had, what I have here, what determined my message? What was senior to my message? That's what I was struggling with. And so I needed to be able to state the message in one short sentence. Okay, it's the takeaway. It's what the audience is going to remember days, weeks, or months later after the speech. Okay, so we had the mechanics are the most, we'll say the least important. Above that is the message. What determines the message? And that's what I was struggling with. How do I get my message? And this is what I came up with. I came up with what I call my life force, my life energy. Now, I don't want to go too far off the reservation here, but I'm not this thing. This is a physical unit. My life energy exists outside of this body. And I can get bad news and my energy drops down. I can get good news and my energy goes up. I can see a sports team and my sports team wins and I jump up and down and I go crazy with life energy because we just got a touchdown. Okay. And so I'm going, what is that? How do I get that life energy? And what I saw, this happened in 1993, when I went to my first district conference, and I saw Dana Lamont, who's the 1992 world champion, speak. Dana's blind, and he stood up behind a lectern, and he had no he had no gestures, he had no stage movement, he had horrible eye contact with the audience. And so, and just so you know, I said that with Dana on stage with me. So, but he had incredible life energy up there. I felt like he was just talking to me, and I'm going, what is that? And I define my life force as this. First of all, it's my convictions. Okay, now, conviction's an interesting word because you can have conviction and you can get a conviction. Okay, same word. It's not even a homonym, it's the same exact word. So my question is, and again, we don't have a chance to dialogue here, but I will tell you what happens when I ask this. I said, what does it take to get a conviction? And people go through, you got to break the law, you have to be tried. Also, I said, yeah, but they go, you have to be proved guilty. I said, how guilty? They go, beyond a reasonable doubt to get a conviction. So here's what I looked at. When I'm talking about a subject, yeah, I have conviction on that subject if I have handled my reasonable doubts on the subject. But if I'm standing up thinking that the subject I'm talking about, I'm not really sure about it, because what's going to happen if I'm not sure and I have hesitancy in my message, I'm afraid somebody's going to stand up and go, liar, that's not true, he's a liar. And so what happens if I don't have real conviction on my message, I'm going to withhold myself from the audience. And I'm going to withhold my I'm going to speak with hesitation. I'm going to speak with reservation. So I would go through a subject and make sure that I'd handled my reasonable doubts on that subject. And then I have conviction on this subject. The next one was passion. Now, I used to think passion was about an extreme likingness or desire for something. That's what I thought passion was. Then I looked up the root word of passion is suffer. And I went, wait, when you have passion for something, you're not suffering, you love it. And then I started to think about, when you have passion for something, you do things that have suffering in them, but you don't consider it suffering. And the example I would give you is if, let's say you have two parents, and I've actually seen this happen. One parent, they have two kids and they say, oh, Sally and Jimmy are doing so great. Sally's on gymnastics and Jimmy's playing soccer. They're doing great in school. And they get up this morning and they're getting out of the house on time. And I'm so proud of them and how they're growing and developing. That woman or that individual, whoever is doing talking, has passion for their kids. Someone else says, oh man, I feel like just a taxi driver. All I do is take my kids to soccer practice and I take them to gymnastic practice. I'm a cook. All I'm doing is doing laundry. I'm a maid. I'm just doing laundry and lunch. And, oh my gosh, I just need a break. They lost their passion. Both people are doing the same thing. One of them considers it suffering. The other one doesn't consider it suffering. And my story was when I was in high school, I had a crush on a girl my freshman year. Her name was Joanna. I had a lot of passion for Joanna. And I asked her out when I was a junior. And people go, oh, that must have been terrible to wait 2 years. I said, no, I was just waiting for the right time. But you see, I didn't consider the 2 years suffering. That was the thing. I didn't consider it suffering. I had tremendous passion. Now, if I didn't, I would have considered it suffering on the thing. But I was looking at times in my life where I just had great passion for something. I had passion for skiing and snow skiing. And yeah, it might be freezing cold and the snow's up to my knees and I can't see and the wind's blowing, but I don't consider myself suffering. I'm loving what I'm doing. So when I'm speaking that subject I want to have passion for it. I don't consider it suffering. Now, here's the thing. You can give a speech with passion and conviction and knock the audience's head off. It's like you're like a Southern Baptist minister, fire and brimstone, and you're all going to hell. And that's the type of speech, and you disconnect from the audience. So we got to couch this back down. And that's where we have sincerity comes in. Now, sincerity, these are my definitions. I look up these words and I go, what's that mean? It's interesting. Sincerity means clean, really what it means. You don't have an ulterior motive you're playing with. You're not trying to manipulate the audience into something. You're being honest, clean with them. And actually, it's interesting. The root word to sincere it's a Greek word that means no wax, which I thought was strange. But as I dug into it, they used to make these pots and some of the pots would break and they would take a wax and they would glue them back together. And that was an insincere pot. But a sincere pot was never broken. It was whole, it was clean, it was pure, it was exactly what you thought you were getting. So that was a sincere pot. It had no wax. And so if we look at ourselves as individuals, do we have some wax we're sticking together, trying to let people not know who we really are? We're doing the imposter syndrome up there, trying to be somebody bigger than we think, from that standpoint. And then the last one is humility. And speaking with humility, being humble in front of the audience. And the root word to humble is ground. I thought it was, I said ground when I said, yeah, here's the thing. Have you ever had a speaker speak down to you, act like they're the smartest one in the room? You people, you know what you need to do to survive? The wasted talent in this room, they're acting like they are the best thing in the world and they're talking down to the audience. The audience is on the ground, they're on the stage. Well, I go, if you're a humble person, you're on the ground and you put your audience on the stage and you talk up to your audience. And I would give the example, if your audience was Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu and Gandhi and Sister Teresa and Martin Luther King Jr., that was your audience, would you stand up and say, how many dreams are you not going to live because of your fears? Would you talk to them that way? No, you'd be going, I'm so humbled to be in front of you. I'm not sure what to say, but you would be really in awe that these people wanted to hear from you. Let me share something in my life. I want to share something with you, but you are so much wiser than I am. That's humble. And when I had a lesson I had a lesson in my competitions where in 2003, I was in the regions and I won the contest hands down, but I went over 1 second and I got disqualified. And a lesson I had to learn. And the next year I came back and I was a little arrogant. And I came into a division level contest with the attitude of, thanks for showing up. I'm a regional and international speaker. Thanks for showing up to this division level contest so I can win it and go on and speak to the audiences I want to talk to. And it wasn't over the top, but there was an edge on me and I needed a lesson in humility. And I lost at the division after being to regions the last 2 years. And I needed that lesson. And the competitions gave it to me. And I learned the importance of humility. And I learned the importance of whenever I'm talking to an audience, that better be the most important group of people in my life at that moment. And there's always, in any audience I've ever spoken to, there are people who are smarter than I am. And just so you know, that's not a real high bar, but there are people who are smarter than I am. There's people that are more experienced than I am. And there's people that have been through more trying or difficult situations than I've been. And so I think that's true for all of us. And I can give you a dozen examples of where that's been the case. So it's very dangerous from my standpoint. It's very disingenuous as well to stand in front of an audience and act like you're the smartest, the most experienced, the toughest person in the room, and talk down to them. So humility is another part of that life force. So you take this conviction and passion, but you couch it with sincere humility. And I get this life energy that comes out of me where I'm focused. And I think that you guys can see that when you're on here. I'm very much alive when I'm talking to you. I'm just here, but I believe in what I'm saying. I hope you're seeing that this isn't just something that I read a book on and go, oh yes, well, in order to be a really good speaker, what you really need to do is, I'm like repeating the book. No, I believe what I say and I'm trying to say it. And I hope it's not coming across anywhere where I'm talking down to you. I want to try to, I'm on the same page as you are. So that's part of that life energy that I try to channel. And when I looked at the 3 parts of the speech, this was another test I used to give myself and finding my voice again. I'll pop out just so I can look at you. There were a number of times I would be getting ready to give a speech, especially in my early years, and I'd be standing off the side of the stage. Sometimes it was in Toastmasters, but I was doing a lot of speaking outside of Toastmasters as well. And I'd be getting ready to talk to some group and I go, oh, I wish I'd never taken this. Oh, I wish I had, why? I was so nervous. I'm going, why did I say I would speak? They don't want to hear this. I doubted my message, the whole thing. And then I had this thing I started doing and I called it the building on fire test. And my question was, if the building was on fire, could I go in there and tell those people that they need to get out of here because their life depends upon it? And I go, yeah, I could do that. Good. So if I'm going to speak and the building on fire intention is this high, I need to make sure my speech intention is just as important. This message is just as important as if this building was on fire to them. So I would imagine if I was going to go tell that audience, the building's on fire, you need to get out of here right now, I would make sure my message got across, my communication was there, they understood it because their life depended upon it. So it's sort of in my mind, mock up that, then I might go, if I'm going to go out and tell them my message, I'm going to have to do it with that same intensity, but maybe not as much urgency so that they get my message as it comes across here. So that was a little test I used to do with myself. Don't have to do it anymore, but I did it for several years before I spoke, was the building on fire test. And when I talk about stage fright, and we had a question in the last session about shyness. Yeah, well, what if the building was on fire? I don't care how shy you are. You would go in and tell the audience, you tell the people, you got to get out of the building because you're going to die. You would overcome whatever's holding you back to speak because the message was so important. And that's what I started looking at. And any nervousness I had, any hesitation I had, I really didn't feel my message was that important. Otherwise, I would overcome it to get that message out to the audience. So on my delivery basics, I consider the mechanics of the speech about 20%. Okay. And I know Pat gave some other statistics today. This is this is what I've experienced, and they're not necessarily parallel. Okay. The message is 30%. The clarity in the message, this isn't the power of your speech. Okay. I actually believe you should be able to stand up in front of them on a single mic, stand in front of an audience, and with your vocal and oratory excellence, take them on a journey and move them. You don't need to be jumping around on stage and doing cartwheels, flailing your arms. Through oratory excellence, we should be able to move them. So the message is 30% of the power of the speech, but my life force is 50% of the power of the speech. How much do I believe the message? How passionate I am that I get this message across, how sincere and humble I am in delivering it. That's the power that I'm going to have. And what that does, that life force pushes that message out through the mechanics. So the message is coming out to the mechanics I put in place, but the mechanics by themselves aren't worth anything. And a message with no life force behind it, there's no caring, there's no love, there's no joy in that. Okay, it's moving. Where to look for your messages? Okay, finally, we're in here 35 minutes. We finally get down to some freaking meat. Okay. So the first one is, what's your story? I'm going to tell you a story about this one. So I'm at a community banquet. I think it was the Chamber of Commerce here in Glendale. And the keynote speaker was a homeless lady who had been a homeless heroin addict. She was now married, had a couple of kids, and she talked about what it was like to have a chemical substance control her entire thought and motivation in life, and have no wherewithal to get herself back on the road of life she wanted to be on, and where she had to go emotionally, where she had to go spiritually to start to turn her life around, what she found in herself and the way. When she was done, there was not a dry eye in that room. And I sat there at one of those round tables looking at her going, man, I wish I was a homeless heroin addict. And then I thought, what a horrible thought to have. And this was actually the next thought I had. I said, maybe I could get hit by a truck on the way home and learn to walk again in a year. And I'm going, why do I have these horrible thoughts going through my head? And I went, I want to inspire an audience like she does, but I haven't had any bad things happen to me. And when I say this to audiences, when I can see you, a lot of people start nodding and they go, yeah, I haven't, I wasn't wrongly incarcerated for murder for 20 years. I don't know what I would talk about, and what I discovered, the reason, again, this is what I figured out. The reason that people that have had really bad things happen to them make great speakers is because in order to overcome that bad thing, they really had to find themselves. They had to discover who they were, or they weren't going to get out of the mess they were in. My uncle was the 13th POW taken in North Vietnam during the Vietnam conflict. He was there for 7.5 years, and now he actually lives up in the Bay Area, and now he's a overweight, balding guy with bad dental work, And he can be sitting in your audience. That's why I say respect your audience. You don't know who's there, but he speaks all over for the Navy and stuff on what his experiences were, and trains a lot of people in POW techniques and stuff, or issues. He's been a great speaker because he got to know himself. He goes, he came and spoke at my high school, and he had my high school totally stunned and quiet. If you can imagine having an entire high school with their jaws dropping, because he just told them the truth. But in the process of that, he really got to know who he was. So when he spoke, he really spoke with that sincerity and that humility, and it really came across so well. But we don't have to have horrible things happen to us. When I looked at what my story was, I actually started getting a little depressed, because I went, man, I grew up in a good family, nothing there. I had a good education. I have had good jobs. What am I going to talk about? But I look back, I started looking back, and I went, well, as I shared with you, I grew up in this little town in Eastern Indiana, 2,000 people. I was the 4th generation in that town. My family had a milk and ice cream business. We raised horses, and my first job was shoveling manure. And I was the only boy in the family. There were 6 kids. Now I've given that away, but the way I say that in all my talks is there were 6 kids in the family. They were all boys, except 5 of them. And so people have to do the math, and they go, okay, But I can remember standing in that barn, and I was like 11 years old trying to wish that manure in the manure spreader, and it wouldn't go. The only way the job got done was 1 scoop at a time. And that was one of the things I learned. I went, wow, I've carried that lesson with me my whole life. Another thing I learned was it was better to handle it on a daily basis than allow it to accumulate. And that's a lesson I've carried through my life, my whole life. I know people, if I wanted my weekends free, I clean the barn every morning. If I wanted to spend Saturday shoveling manure all day, I'd let it all accumulate and I had to be up there taking care of it. So in my life, I've tried to keep everything, don't allow things to accumulate, stay ahead of them so I can go and do things I want. That was a really important lesson I learned. And the third lesson I learned shoveling manure was any job I had after that was a promotion. So only one way to go from there. I was going up, right? Well, I started telling that and I immediately started connecting with the audience, but I also started to connect with myself because I realized I had really good I had good life experiences and life stories. And I started to really embrace who I was. And I think we all struggle. We all have a primary struggle, I think. We can struggle with a lot of things in our life, but we all have a primary struggle. And I grew up being the only boy, very much in the shadow of my father, who I idolized when I was young. And then when I came out of school and tried to go into business, sort of got blindsided by someone who was, it took me years to understand, actually very threatened. And he didn't want any family member telling him what to do. And he bought his brothers out and bought his father out. Now he had the business, he could run it. Just when I was getting out of college, and I'm thinking, great, Dad and I have the business, let's go. I was just another family member trying to tell him what to do. And so I got that full brunt, a lot of being basically told that, I wasn't working hard enough, wasn't fast enough, wasn't smart enough to be doing this for 4 years out of school. And here I am, a private pilot. I've sailed across the Atlantic. I've climbed mountains, I do all this stuff. And I'm having a really hard time getting any joy in the family business. And that was something I was very, very committed to as part of my story. And thus you see my world champion speech is on the power of validation, because that's actually what brought me out of that whole scenario, because I had to learn how to handle invalidation. And learning how to handle invalidation was part of my story, so that I learned by validating others and identifying what invalidation was and working on the positive aspects of things is how you built teams, you brought people together. I started to embrace what my story was, the struggles that I'd had, what I'd done well, what I hadn't done well. And each one of us has a story, and you don't always put it in your speeches. But what happens is you stand up, you know who you are when you're talking to your audience. And that wasn't something I sat down on a Sunday afternoon and I wrote my story. That was something that was like peeling an onion for many months or a couple of years trying to figure out what's my story. And I would get little tidbits of it and I would change it. I would do a lot of speeches in Toastmasters. My club didn't know I was doing it on my story, but I'm doing it. And as I gave the speech, I go, well, that worked, but that didn't. I'd get a little piece of it. So this is something I was working on really figuring out what my story is. Because if I'm going to be able to stand in front of an audience, I have to have a clear identity, idea of where I'm coming from, who I am, and what my strengths are, what my weaknesses are, and be honest with myself. As I said, I've got to connect with myself before I connect with the audience. So that was the first step I was trying to do there. Now let's look at the second point. I'll see how many of these I'm going to go through. I have a speaking tips card, and it's a free download on my website with all these points on it. The next one is, okay, so you don't have one message, you have thousands of messages. I know there's people that are going, what's my message? It's like, what's my purpose in life? You have thousands of purposes in life, you want to be healthy? Yeah, good, that's a purpose. You want to be financially stable? Yes, that's a purpose. You want to have a good family? Yes, that's a purpose. You want to have good friends? Yeah, that's a purpose. You got a lot of purposes in life. Okay, so what's your philosophy? Okay. That's another one. And the philosophy is, again, I'm going to come out of this. Your philosophy is not one thing. It's a philosophy is like a policy you have. And again, I was doing some self-improvement, challenging, sort of self-improvement programs and stuff. And I realized that one of the things that in it, you'd write policy of your life on how you're going to handle situations. Right? So that you sort of set it up and that starts to define you. And I realized that any area of my life I didn't have a philosophy for, I was at the effect of, I didn't have something to stabilize me. Now, as an example, I have a philosophy of sleep. A philosophy of sleep. Yeah. Well, here's my question. Have you ever seen someone, if they don't get enough sleep, they're crabby all day? Yeah, we've all seen that, right? I didn't get enough sleep last night. They just make everybody's day just horrible because they didn't get enough sleep last night. How many times do you think I don't get enough sleep? I'm flying all over the world. I got 18 hours over here. I land in frickin', Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and I can't get to sleep till 5 in the morning because of the 11-hour time difference. And I got to get up at 7 and go deliver 3 seminars. You think I'm tired? Yeah, I'm tired. Here's my philosophy of sleep. Life is lived being awake. The day's here. Let's live. Okay. If I need more sleep, I'll take a nap. I'll get some sleep tomorrow night. But I know people that all they want to do is go to bed. They go, literally they go, oh, it was so nice. I slept in till 10 o'clock this morning. It was wonderful. I go, do you know what you missed out there in the day? And here's the point. I never remember a good night's sleep in my life. When I look back on my life, I don't go, oh, you remember that? It was January 16th, 1984. It was perfect. The sheets were so nice. The room was dark. The sprinklers didn't come on. That was just no, I never remember a good night's sleep. I remember cycling from the Russian border to Helsinki over 120 kilometers on 42 hours. I'm not sleeping for 42 hours on a human rights ride I was on back in 2002. I remember that. I was alive. So life's lived at being awake. The day's here. Let's go get it. And there's a lot of days I wake up and I'm like, oh God, I'm so tired. You shake it off and you get going and you go out and have this incredible day, get some more sleep tomorrow. That's a philosophy I have. So if I don't get enough sleep, I don't bitch at everybody in my life and tell them, how crabby I am and make their life miserable because I didn't get enough sleep. Let's live. So the point is we can go down. You think there's a speech in that life is lived being awake? Yeah, I think that there could be a speech in that. You look at the amount of drug use and alcohol use and computer use, or people get hypnotized and stuff. Yeah, let's wake up and live. There's a great speech in defining what your philosophies are in life. Look at a couple more of these, and let's see, because I want to pop around here. What's the next one? What are your defining moments? I'll keep this up. There's certain moments that stand out in our lives. And life doesn't happen in months or weeks or days or hours. It happens in minutes and seconds. And I'll share with you a very brief defining moment. And when I started this, looking at defining moments, I thought I had 2 or 3 in my life. I probably have 30 or 40,000. Every day I have defining moments now because I track them. I look at them. Actually, I'll tell you 2 of them. But one was, I was 23. I was working for my family's business. I'd opened up a new milk route, and I'd hired a routeman and trained him, and he was messing the route up like crazy. And came in one day, said he couldn't run it, and I found out he was going on another job interview. That's why he couldn't run it. And I had to go out and run the milk route. And all the customers told me, well, he was bad mouthing the company. And the point was, if there was ever anybody that needed to be fired, this guy deserved to be fired. I'd never fired anybody in my life, so I met him at the front door and dismissed him. And I thought I was, I thought I was finally making it up into manhood. I finally fired somebody. I'm a tough guy. Now inside I was shaking a bit, but I come back in, everybody's like congratulating me, and you got rid of him. He was a jerk, all that sort of stuff. I go back in my office, and there's an old guy that had grown up in my family's business named Oscar. And Oscar had graduated from about the 8th grade, but he was one of the smartest guys I knew because he looked at every day and figured out what he learned that he could apply to tomorrow. And he worked himself up to be the sales manager of our company. And he looked at this 23-year-old kid, just fired somebody, cocky as could be. And he stood up and he looked at me and he said, well, Lance, did you fire him? I said, yeah, I did. And he nods and he says, anybody can fire somebody. That doesn't take any special skill or talent. Can you get him to work? Now that takes a manager. And he walked out the door. And he forever changed my life, because I didn't want to be the type of person that just cut people's heads off and kicked them in the butt. I wanted to be the type of person that could bring out the best in somebody, that could help them succeed in life. That was a defining moment. Okay. About 17 was that 5 years ago, I had a motorcycle accident and woke up in the hospital. Don't remember the accident. And I'm laying there and I got the neck thing on and all that. And the doctor comes over and he says, his name's Dr. Adam. He goes, well, you got a broken ankle. And I look down on my left leg and my foot's clear off my left leg. I'm like, what's it doing over there? And he goes, we're checking. You think you got some cracked ribs in your right shoulder? And I'm like, I was awake about 90 seconds, and I'm not kidding. This is what my reaction was. I looked at my foot, I looked at what was going on, and my best blue jeans were cut off me, and I'm lying on the gurney, and I went, man, there's going to be a great speech in this. And I literally was like, oh, look what I get to talk about. I just had a motorcycle accident. I got a broken ankle. You know, the amount of this is going to be fantastic speech material. And I wound up with a speech on it going, look, things don't always go as planned, but did they go as bad as they could have? And I broke an ankle and I was walking again in 5 weeks. And I go, I could have been incapacitated. I could have been killed. There's all sorts of horrible things. And I looked at that. I said, I was happy to have a broken ankle. You know, so you look at your defining moments, and there's usually a good speech in that. It also helps discover who you are. Another one is I do this. I used to do this very regularly. So when you come at a fork in the road, which means you got to make a decision. What values do you have that you made that decision by? It could be we're looking to go to 2 movies. We're going to go to 2 restaurants, or I'm going to get on 2 different freeways. I'm going to go to 2 different places for vacation. You know, which one do I go to? I would start examining how I made decisions, and that started to give me insight into what my values and priorities were based on the decisions I made. Okay, so there's a lot of introspection I was doing, but I started to discover who I was. But not only that, as I discovered the values in me, I was able to come up with speech topics. I had the fork in the road. I said that one thing. I think you guys, I got enough people here that are old enough. Do you remember City Slickers with Billy Crystal on the cattle drive when the guys go out from New York? Yeah, okay. So Jack Palance is in that, and Billy Crystal's riding along with Jack Palance, and Jack Palance goes, there's just one thing you got to know about life. Billy Crystal goes, what's the one thing? What's the one thing? And Jack Palance goes, that's what you've got to figure out. Well, I came out of that movie going, what's the one thing? I wanted to find the one thing in my life, and I boiled it down, and I found the one thing. You guys want to hear it? That's what you got to figure out. Because your one thing's different than mine. But I'll tell you, part of mine was me really being true to myself with my integrity, and really being true to what I believed was sort of my one thing. Is that really where I sit, or am I compromising my value in some way? I will give you that insight into what it was. That started to give me insight into who I was, what I have. Oh, find the extraordinary in the ordinary. And this was something that I would do all the time. So I'm just on my desk here. So I have a thermos coffee cup here. And I would go do a speech on a thermos coffee cup. What is extraordinary about an ordinary thermos coffee cup? I would walk by a set of stairs, and I go do a speech on stairs. What's extraordinary about stairs? I would be stuck in traffic, and I go do a speech on traffic. What's extraordinary about traffic? And I would just do these. I would drill myself on these things all the time to try to like break through and get my creativity going back up again. But looking at ordinary things, and thus I get a speech in the World Championship about getting your parking validated. And what's extraordinary about getting validated? It's what changes people's lives when you validate them, not their parking. And so that was one of the threads that went into that message that I got. This was another thing I looked at was, what's your attention on right now? And this came from, I would have to give speeches in Toastmasters, and I would go, I don't know what to talk about. And I would go, where's my attention right now? And I would look at remember I talked about the best speeches are the speaker's attention's on the audience, and the audience's attention's on the speaker. Well, what's my attention on? It's going to be really hard for me to get up and give a great talk about, let's say, succeeding in life if my attention's on the fact that my card meter just ran out on the street. I'm going to get a $60 ticket. That's where my attention is. I need my attention on the audience. So I started going, well, where's my attention? And I would find these subject matters that my attention was on right at that moment. Now, just as an example, but maybe my attention was on the fact that I'm not in as good a shape as I want to be, and I'm feeling like I'm not feeling as healthy. So I do a speech on not feeling healthy, because that's where my attention was. You know, and that gave me a subject to talk on, and I started to focus in. I started to get insight into where my attention was. What are you certain about? What you'd be willing to die for? Yeah. So let me just do these last two, and then we'll have some fun. What am I certain about? Remember, I talked about conviction. I said, well, I'm pretty certain about gravity. I violated the laws of gravity several times and I always lost. And I'm pretty certain that the earth is round. After that, it drops off pretty fast. But what I would try to do is whatever speech I was giving, I would try to get a high level of certainty up on that message. And then that allowed me to come through with that conviction that I wanted on it. The last one I had on there was, what are you willing to die for? And this came from a James Bond movie I was watching, and James Bond was getting beat up. It was actually Daniel Craig, that was the movie. And he was getting beat up to get a code. And I was watching and I said, man, I'd be going 73443. Here's the code. I wouldn't want to go through that. And I went, well, what, that's interesting. What is it I'd be willing to die for though? And I started asking myself that question. And when I have parents, I said, and I'm not trying to go on a morbid component here, but I said, how many parents do we have in the room? And the hands go up. I said, how many of you would be willing to die for your children if it came down to it? And all the hands stay up. I said, unless you have teenagers, and the hands go down. So, but I said, now I don't want to be morbid on that, but the thing is, there's a value that you have. There's a principle that you have that you would be willing to make that sacrifice for the benefit of your children. There's a speech in there, right in that component. And, you know, it's like you could say, push this button and you can have, you know, you can win the lotto. I don't know if anybody won it yesterday or not, but the lotto is $1.1 billion. Push this button and you can have $1.1 billion. But when you do it, like everybody in India is going to die. You know, would you push the button? You know, or push it, or we're going to kill you. No, I'm not going to push it. Kill me because the 1.4 billion people in India are more important than my life. Go ahead and push the button. You know, I go, when you do, they start to look at what would I be willing to die for? What would I not be willing to die for? I started to find my real values in me that started to anchor in on who I was. So that was a bit of a journey that I took along that line. Now, here's what I want to do. We have about 35 minutes. So what I want to do is I want you guys to participate with me. What I normally do is if we have a live venue, I will walk around the venue and I'll pick 3 items just up. I don't bring them with me. It's like a coffee cup, a napkin, and a swizzle stick, or a rubber band, a bottle of water, a ballpoint pen, a pad of paper, whatever I can find around. And I put 3 items up on a table. I ask somebody to come up and pick up one of the items, and then we do a speech on that item. Now I'm going to do one right now that I have, which is, I just have a pen sitting here on my desk. Okay. So I want you to raise your hand and I'm going to call on you quickly. So the first exercise we're going to do, is we're going to share briefly what's extraordinary about this ordinary pen. Okay. Now, the more creativity, the better. The crazier the idea, the better, because this is what I used to do. I would look at a pen and then I would run this process on it. Okay, so this is just to get our creative juices flowing. So what I want you to do is raise your hand. Put your hand up in the reactions. I'll call on you and just say, and you'll have 30 seconds or something like that. So let's just start with who I had, Anna Garcia. Anna, what's extraordinary about this pen? Unmute and just tell us.
It is mightier than the sword.
Okay, the pen's mightier than the sword. Great. Who else do we have? We have somebody else. Just jump in here. Let's have some fun with this. Come on, guys. I need you to participate.
It tells my deepest and darkest secrets.
Okay, Linda. What's that?
It tells my deepest and darkest secrets.
So you with this, you can communicate your deepest and darkest secrets, right? Because you can write them down. Valerie Brostrom, what's extraordinary about the pen?
This is Lance Miller's pen, Lance Miller's personal pen. He uses it for everything. It's his most important tool in his life.
Well, I didn't know that. I'm glad you had that insight, but thank you. Excellent. And let's see. Let's get a couple more here because I have Pamela McHenry.
I can create anything and pretend I'm anything, and I could do anything with this pen to expose and reveal my deepest secrets in life.
And that's okay. And let's just dig into that so I can understand. That's because you're putting it on paper. Is that what it is? You're getting out of your head on the paper. What is it?
Because I can put everything on paper and reveal to myself what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. And it could be private and nobody has to see what's going on. It's like morning
great.
pages.
Good. Thank you, Julia.
I want you to know,
Okay, wait, say it again. You're coming in and out in your volume.
the ballpoint pen was invented by a Hungarian guy whose name was Biro, B-I-R-O.
Excellent. This pen was actually invented by someone. It wouldn't exist if someone had not created it. Excellent. Grace.
Helps you to organize your thoughts and come to a consensus on ideas.
Good. So what we can do is we can get the thoughts out of our head and get them down so we can organize things and put some order into it and figure out what's real, right?
Yep.
Okay, good. So I'm going to do one more. Let's just do, give me one more hand up here. SM, who's SM?
Shanti here. When I look at the ballpoint pen, I feel like I need to go back to the ink writing if you have old age, and then recycle pen. Landfill is coming to my mind. How many pens are going into the landfills?
Okay, great. And I see it's Gani. You got your hand up there. So tell me what you're thinking.
Yeah, it's Gani. Yeah, this pen seems like a perfect size to scratch my head whenever I get some itching. Yeah, maybe it goes right and back of my neck, and it gives me a perfect relief from the itch.
Okay, good. So you can use it to scratch your head. See, that's it. That's what I talk about. That is like creativity. You go, well, let's do something really out of the box. I can use it to scratch. I got a tool to scratch my head. Mr. Was it Traore? Is that what it is?
Yeah, I was talking about the pen because as a teacher, this pen is really interesting for me and extraordinary for me when I'm going to school, teaching people and doing mark with it. This is really ordinary for me.
Okay,
Thanks.
great. Thank you very much. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to pick one of these things just because it's my seminar. I get to do what I want. But all we do is we pick one. It's not that one's better than another. It's just I'm going to pick one and then we're going to play another side of this and see what we can do to put a speech together on it. So I like the idea that I'm thinking it was Pamela was talking about how you can get the thoughts out of your head. There's somebody that said, get the thoughts out of your head and organize them, because you get sort of, you get a little exterior to them. You can get down, you can see them because you can organize them. So what I want to know is, on a defining moment in your life, was there a point in your life where you had a problem, and when you got away from the problem, you were able to solve the problem because you put some distance there and you can look at the problem then. And this is where we sort of open our soul up to each other and we talk about the truth of what I was dealing with. And it wasn't until I got away from it and out of it that I was able to see it. So you see the correlation. I've got the pen, I'm writing things down. Now I'm looking for a defining moment where I get organization because I get sort of a way I can look at the situation. So does anybody want to, SM, you've got your hand up. I don't know if it's still up from that standpoint or you want to turn it off. So is there anybody has a defining moment where you're able to sort something out, have a beneficial forward movement in life because you got exterior to the situation? Okay, Jane, I see your hand.
I had an issue with my brother, and I sorted out that if I could continue with this issue, even though I knew I was right, if I told you what the issue was, I am 99 and 44% sure you would all agree with me that I was right. But I realized it would impact me. It would impact my health. It would impact my well-being. It would impact my life if I continued and held all of this inside of me. And I went and talked to my brother, and it was like nothing had ever happened. The whole issue was resolved. But when I got that clarity about I could continue to be right, but it would impact me.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Porva.
Yes, so I've used a similar tactic when I don't want to, there are a lot of thoughts that come into our heads and that you struggle with, but you don't necessarily want to impose that on other environments. So how I've used pen in my life is, if something is troubling me, instead of talking to someone or putting that negativity on someone, I would just take a pen and notebook and write a letter to them and just get all of those emotions out of me. And as I did that, I was able to better understand, and I was able to be a spectator instead of like someone who's reacting to things. So that's
Beautiful.
always helped me a lot.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. And Grace.
Yeah, I'm kind of relating this back to the session that I had earlier about conflict resolution. So you can have 2 points of view. Each person can write down their thoughts, and the other person then allows them to see in their mind what they're thinking of and what is maybe the conflict between those two parties, right? So that's definitely, I've had situations like that before, which is like, we can't communicate that well with words, but maybe just seeing it plain and simple out on pen and paper allows us to put words to that, so.
Now, that's great. Now I'm going to ask you, and if you're willing to do this, if you're not, that's totally fine. But is there a specific situation that you can think of that occurred? Because if we're telling a story, we want to be able to give, something concrete on it. And if you don't have something, it's fine. But if there is, that would be great if you could share it.
Well, I think like in company policy, like there were some things that I wanted to try to integrate for the benefit of like training new employees was one of my roles. And so then some people maybe had some conflicting views on how we should approach that. So then we were able to just compile like the strategies of how best to go about that. And then, there was a conflict on how to go about that. But then in the end, we figured out a middle ground on what we can do.
Great. Thank you. Samantha.
Yes, thank you. One of the things I struggle with in public speaking, and I'm trying to get better at this, is learning how to relate experiences to an audience that just cannot relate, like military service. I'd like to be more open about military service and the defining moments, but I need to relate that to a civilian audience who maybe has no understanding of that. And there is a lot of misunderstanding about the military, and some people are for or against it, but I do struggle with that as a public speaker. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for that. And Jay.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that Deanna McInroy mentioned that pen is a great career enhancer.
Excellent.
Thank you, Deanna, for that message.
Thank you, Deanna, for that message. And thank you for Jay for relaying it to us. Excellent. Okay, well, it's a little, let's see, I've got a couple more here. Julie, did you have something else,
Yeah.
Julie? Your hand's back up.
Yeah. I just want to know that I enjoy watching competitions and listen to their speeches. I never would want to compete because I'm nervous about that, but I am a judge many times, and I realize that a lot of people are acting like actors and actresses, and I am really turned off. They have the message, they have the passion, not like the acting. You are not acting, you are talking to us. What is your opinion about it?
Thank you, Jill. Yeah, well, I'm in the middle of one process right now, which we're trying to get some stuff pulled together for a speech. Okay, I'll talk about acting versus speaking in a second, but I totally agree with you what you said on it. Okay, so again, this is the first time I've ever tried this on Zoom. It's a little trickier on Zoom, but if we're going to put a speech together, let's just say that we have a conflict that's going on. And I'm going to use, I think it was Samantha talking about, she's got a military background. She's got a conflict. I'm going to make this up a little bit as I go, Samantha. You've got a working in an environment that they don't appreciate or respect what your military background is. Okay. And so you've got this whole situation that you're going on. So if I started talking about, I was in the Army for 6 years, and I actually had made it up to be a sergeant. I was on 2 tours in Iraq. I was in many life-threatening situations where we had to rely on each other. We had to make sure supplies were in. These were life and death situations. Then I exited the Army and I got a job at Walmart. And Walmart didn't seem to have the same appreciation and the same intensity that I was used to with my teams. People would show up late for work. They wouldn't necessarily work hard and see that the job was done, so the customer was taken care of. People were more concerned about themselves, and I didn't know really what to do with it. And I sat down one time and I just picked up a pen and I started writing out my feelings. And it was amazing as I listed things out, my strengths, my weaknesses, what I was happy with, what I was sad about. I started to realize that I was putting distance between myself and the conflicts that I had. And it was that distance that was so important for me. And I realized I started to gain more understanding for the people I was working with, that they didn't have an understanding for what I'd been through. And there was no way they could, because they'd never been there. So as I wrote out my feelings, I started to be able to relate to other people and understand them as I started to understand myself. And there's a great benefit to having distance on our problems so that we can view them, because when they're too close against our face, we can't see them. But as I got distance, not only did I see my problems, but I saw my solutions. And that has made the difference in my life. Now, that was just a real short scenario of trying to take some of the stuff, put it together from what we had. I'm not really happy with that speech, but it's sort of what we had to do with. But I think you get the idea, right? Where you got the inspiration from his pen, writing things down. I look at the defining moment in my life. Where could I tie that into a real situation? And I have a message now that I can share to the audience about getting distance on our problems to find solutions to come around along that line. So that's a little bit of the process that I go through. So we have about 20 minutes left. So what I'd like to do now is just open this up to Q&A. And I'm going to start with Julie and her question about acting versus speaking. And here's the thing, public speaking is not acting. And in acting, you drop a fourth wall and you invite the audience to watch a scene. And in acting, you're playing against another actor on the stage that the audience is a spectator to. In public speaking, the audience is a participant, and you're playing against the audience. You're always talking to the audience, but you don't want, and you have emotion, and you have vocal variety, and you have gestures, and you have intention. You have all those things, but what you don't have is you do not have an emotion that is represented, that is not present at that moment. And what I mean by that, if you said, when I was 6 years old, I lost my doll and I was so sad, I couldn't stand it. You're not 6 years old. You didn't just lose your doll. You're talking to the audience. I had a speech one time I was watching, and a guy talked about getting a phone call that his father had died, and he fell on the floor whimpering on the floor, and it was in a contest. And I'm like, he didn't just get the call. His father died several years ago, but he would say, I got the call, and that you would tell the audience what was going on. I remember when I got the call and I suddenly felt a carpet against my face, and I had fallen on the floor and I could hardly breathe. I remember just shaking terribly. You just tell them the story. You don't act it. And the acting is dropping the fourth wall, inviting them in, and bringing out emotions that you are putting in the present that are in the past, because that starts to put an acting mode. You tell the audience about the emotion that you're experiencing. You sharing with the audience what's going on. So that's acting versus.
Give that example. Could you just give that example? Because that's a great point. But could you give that example of how you would say it in a public speaking? You've already showed us about the acting. I know you talked about it. Could you just say it? The same thing.
Well, which one, about your father dying, or what?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, like your father, I received, instead of going, I received the call. If I'm here, I received the call. I fall on the floor whimpering. Versus, no, I remember I was standing in my living room and I picked the phone up and I received the call, and on the other end, I heard that my father died. I don't know what happened, but the next thing I felt the carpet against my face and I was shaking, and I realized I had completely collapsed on the floor. Right now I'm telling you the story about it
Right.
versus acting it out. Okay.
I love
And
that.
so, but
Yes.
what people try to do is they try to create a dramatic impact on the audience. And in order to do that, they think they have to be something other than themselves. And the best dramatic impact is being yourself and talking to that audience. And it's the oratory excellence. It's the ability to connect and tell the story to the audience, not act, you know, scream and yell and, you know, I killed my dog and all the different things I've heard, you know, trying to put emotion into it. But you have emotion, you know, you have emotion in your speech. It's not like you're sterile in your speech. You have emotion. You can go, you know, at 4 years old, that was really upsetting to me back then. You know, but it doesn't mean you start crying right then, but you can go at 4 years old, man, that was really upsetting. I always would, another example just to help you, I go, how would you say it to a friend if you were having coffee? Or if you were talking to someone in the hallway and would you stop and you say, yeah, I got a call, and then you fell on the floor and, you know, the guy's, this guy's nuts, what's going on, right? No, you would, if you're having coffee with someone, you would just talk to them and tell them the story. Do that. I said, be yourself, talk to the audience. That's where the power comes in. But it's that oratory excellence that we're looking for. Okay, is there another question we got? If you've got one, Jay, if Deanna types another one in the chat, please let me know. Okay. So
I think Arnie has a question.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Wade. I'm Mr. Miller. Well,
hello, Arnie.
Hello,
I'm here. I'm good.
Sir,
Thanks. What's your question?
give me one second. Yes, Mr. Miller. So what matters more? Is it performance or storytelling? Point number one. You mentioned the message should be in short sentence. How short should it be? Number two. Number three, the voice that you're talking about is not about the sound, but about the dynamics and construct of the whole speech that include, you said, the humility, conviction, and passion. How could you make this more powerful, engaging, and compelling? Thank you.
Well, Arnie, there's the questions you ask, good questions, but there are seminars in their own right. Your communication is complete. Your words, your oratory excellence is what connects with the audience. And I say you should be able to tell a story and hear it on the radio, and it has the same effect on you. I don't know. Does anybody know who Garrison Keillor is from Prairie Home Companion? Probably one of the best storytellers I've ever heard. I listen to him on the radio and I get the pictures of exactly what's going on in Lake Wobegon and the farms, and you know how the tractor's stuck in the mud, and based on his ability to tell the story. That's why I do not agree that like 80% of the speech is your body movement on it. Your words, your emotion, you know, the way you say things impacts that audience, but your gestures follow the words. The gestures are subordinate to the words. I do a weekly speaking tip on YouTube, and I had a situation where I was coaching some people, and they would walk up and they'd say, well, I'd say, what is it? I walked up and knocked on the door. The gestures out sequence, or they go, I knocked on the door. And I'm going, this gestures out sequence. It's like, no, I walked up and I knocked on the door. The gesture is supporting the words from that standpoint. So yeah, you can do the gestures, but I learned this from Dana Lamont, who stood behind a lectern, had no stage movement, very little body, gestures, and I said had horrible eye contact with the audience because he was blind. And I still remember the speech he gave because he had incredible speech craft. He had incredible life energy behind believing it. He knew how to tell the story, sequence the components in, put the descriptions in. I still remember that so clearly. And that was 29 years ago that I heard Dana give that talk about his son. He kept trying to his grandparents lived next door, and the son liked to go next door and visit the grandparents, and that he would leave the house and they didn't know where he was. So they locked the door, and he figured out how to get up and get the door unlocked. And then they did another component over here, and they put a chair in front of it, and he figured out how to get around that. And then they finally got the whole front door locked. And the grandmother calls and says, your son's over here with the garage door opener in his hand. He went out and got in the front seat of the car, got the garage door opener out, hit the garage door opener. Now, this was 29 years ago. I heard this speech and went over to the grandma's house. And then Dana's dawn, if you had that much determination to achieve your goals, what would you be achieving in life? My son would not stop until he got to his grandma's house, on it. But it's our ability to put that story together with our conviction, I said our passion, our life force, our life energy, and have our attention focused on the audience is what really carries our speeches across. And then doing that, we get to know ourselves from that standpoint. So any other questions? And put your hand up. We got Kartik, is that right? Kartik Gupta?
Hi, Lance. Yes, thanks for the session. And I am still new to Toastmasters, and I am in that phase where I'm starting to rehearse my speech. In the sense that write it down and then maybe speak it with my phone recording on and then listen back. So sometimes I feel like my voice itself is not the greatest motivating factor for me to listen back to. And how do I incorporate emotions? How do I overcome that? I won't say I'm super disappointed or I super dislike my own voice, but it's always that factor, you're listening to yourself. You don't always understand. I don't know if my question is coming across in the right sense.
I understand. Let me answer your question.
You.
First of all, we have to listen to you, get used to it, okay?
Yes.
And I say that in jest from the standpoint that listening to yourself in audio and watching yourself on video are experiences probably worse than capital punishment. So, I think instead of having capital punishment, they should make prisoners watch videos of themselves speaking. I think it's a worse punishment. So we're always our worst critics, but yes, you sound like that, unfortunately. A couple of things I recommend when you practice your speech like you give it. And what I mean is you don't practice it sitting at your desk. Don't practice it driving your car in the shower because you're not going to give it like that. Get in a room, stand up, and you give it to something. This is what's very important. You speak to something. I used to go out in my backyard, my other house, and I had some bushes out there, and I would talk to the bushes. My communication was directed to the bushes because when I got in front of an audience, if I'm practicing it just in my head, and I'm like, okay, blah, 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 then I get in front of an audience, that goes away, and I can't find my speech. So I had to get used to talking to something, and I would always go through my whole speech. I wouldn't stop for mistakes because if you practice stopping for mistakes, you're going to give your speech like you practice it. And so you should practice your speech like you want to give it. So just go straight through the speech. And sometimes it would usually, in my early days, it would take me usually about 10 times to get a speech down. Now I can pretty much create speeches in my mind and give them with very little rehearsal, but I'm very well rehearsed in thousands of speeches and, tens of thousands of hours on the stage on that. So we have Mr. Tracor, is that it? Trajorge?
Yeah, thanks a lot, dear. It's Mr. Traore.
Okay. What's your question?
My question is about the icebreaker message speech. As a new member in Toastmasters, you have to deliver the icebreaker message speech for a new member. To take down the challenge, what do you think you should do to give a motivating speech for the very first time?
Well, the purpose of the icebreaker isn't necessarily motivation, and that's what you have to know the purpose of your speech. The purpose is to introduce yourself to the club. And if there's something you want to put motivating in it, have some overriding message in your speech that this is how do you define yourself? This is what it is, and they're motivated by what you've overcome. But the main purpose of the icebreaker, if you look at that, is to introduce yourself to the club and to start speaking before the group and discover your speaking skills. Motivation comes on down the line as you develop those speaking skills. So I don't mix your purposes. It's like, if you're training in the gym to be, a better athlete, you don't say, how can I win the gold medal at the Olympics? You're just training to be a better athlete right now. So just my thing is just just do your icebreaker, do a nice job introducing yourself to the club, and then do your next project. Okay, any other questions here? I've got Doris popped up there with her hand up.
Yes, Lance. You talk about authority versus free will. Many times when I listen to people or experts or winners told us how to compose our speeches, and for example, if several of them will say you use one short phrase that you repeat throughout the speeches. So many people have that idea on their mind already. So, but when I try it, it doesn't seem that it is my style, So how do I balance? In what sense should I use what the experts tips, or how do I feel good that I am trying to understand what the audience interests. Like the audience already have that concept in mind that certain phrases should repeat throughout the speech. Then
Look,
should I?
Understood. Let me just get into the thing. You've got to discover what your speaking style is. And I'll just let you know, I competed for 13 years. Probably one of the reasons I did not hire I didn't even know you could hire world champions. When I thought the world champions were like Tony Robbins. They wouldn't even talk to me when I was competing. I literally thought they were out of reach. I couldn't imagine they would even, be willing to take a call from me. But the other thing was, I had been told throughout a lot of my life how I needed to communicate. And I wanted to discover for myself. I wanted to discover my style of communication. I wanted the messages to be my messages. I didn't want somebody else telling me I had to do this. Now, what I see in the whole speech training area, there's a lot of false information. A lot of people put a lot of rules in it that you have to do this. And I run into this with speakers all the time who come in and they've got very oddly phrased statements in their speeches. They don't make sense. Grammatically, it doesn't work in their speeches. And what I'm looking for is authentic communication coming from the individual. I want you to be there telling your story, and you're clean and pure on the story you're telling. You don't have to have a foundational or repeated phrase in your speech. You have to have a sincere desire to impact the audience. And there's some component parts you're going to come into, but there's a lot of times I get these people, they come in with all these rules that you have to have, and they're just not so. What works for you works for you. And the way you figure out what works for you is to go do it. So go give, 100 speeches in Toastmasters, which is, when I'd won the world championship, I'd given over 300 speeches in Toastmasters, and I'd probably given another 900 outside of Toastmasters in speaking areas, but I had to figure out how I spoke, and so that's what I recommend for you is just, take it, use it, play with it, see if it works for you. It's your speech. It's not, there's not some rule that some God on high said you had to do this or you're an unworthy human being. That didn't happen. Okay. Pamela, did you have something else?
Well, I love this whole workshop. Thank you so much. My question is, how are you engaging on Zoom with the audience? Are you do you see like everyone in front of you? Or are you looking at the camera? I mean, you're looking at the camera because we see you, but I mean, how are you doing this? Do you have a camera in the front, or is it your
I have a camera.
camera?
I have a camera right over my, I have a fixed camera over the top of my laptop. It depends on how I do it. Sometimes I'm just watching myself. I do a lot of these. I'm also an accomplished speaker. So when I speak, I know I'm talking to people. And so I'm not in my head, I'm communicating live to them. But now I have a Zoom set up. I've got a microphone right here that's just off the top of my screen. I got two big lights over here. I've got a camera set up there. And I've got a laptop that's dedicated strictly for Zoom calls, because I have another laptop right here. That's my work laptop. Okay, just so you have an idea. And then for the most part, I'm looking at the audience on the screen, but I only have 3 rows of people that are lit up. Everybody else is black screen. So I just see names and stuff on it. But the bigger part is that I'm awake, I'm alive, I'm interested in talking to you. I have conviction and passion for my subject. And, like I said, that's, that's the more important.
Well, I have a Nexscope camera, so it can be moved in front. And a lot of people say, "Oh, well, we don't see you looking at our eyes." So
Let me ask, let me move over. We're getting right down to the end here. Linda, did you have a question?
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much for everything today, Lance. My question is, I'm really be interested in hearing what you evaluate another speaker on. What is it you're looking for when somebody speaks?
Let me tell you, I put in, first of all, I put in the chat my website, which is lancemillerspeaks.com. And I have a weekly video I put out on speaking tips, and I got a bunch of speaking tips cards and speech evaluation tips cards that are free downloads. I have audio lessons on there if you want it. If you want to stay in touch with me, I'm glad to stay in touch with you. Go to lancemillerspeaks.com and I'm there. I don't know how much time we have left. It was very quick, but Linda, I'm looking for authenticity. I'm looking for a specific storyline, the way it comes. I'm looking for smooth transitions. I'm looking to track what's being said in the speech. I see a lot of times there's added in applicable information that does not contribute to the speech at all. There's missing elements in the speech that there's big gaping holes in it. There's inadequate descriptions of scenario of situations or people and what's actually taking place. There's a lot of things. I'm looking for the communication to be complete, so I don't have confusion in my mind when I'm listening to the speech. And in order to do that, it turns into more of a life coaching session with the person to figure out where the story really resides. But what happens is, I know when I watch the person actually embrace their story and we get their story, they come alive because they're finally saying what they really believe and what they really want to say. And they literally light up